Yeah, to remember.
Yeah.
Honestly, I put grandma on that. Yeah, I'm like, grandma, you're in
Oh,
charge.
we are live, just so let's you know.
We'll stop talking about pajama day then.
All in favor?
Right.
Any abstentions?
Yeah, we're gonna. Pajama day, so quite a bit. It's wonderful. Well, we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 9 o'clock. We are really delighted to have you all with us here today. And I see a number of my colleagues online. Thank you for being here that way or here in the room. We appreciate you in whatever mode you can get here. We need first things first to approve our agenda and the December minutes, which have been distributed. So let's take those in order. First of all, we have an agenda before us that calls on us to review our past equality recommendations first and foremost that are due today, and also establish a workforce subcommittee, as well as receive some other updates. Anyone willing to move to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All right, we have a number of motions. Can I get I'm gonna take Tanya's, I think. And can we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kim. Any discussion around the agenda? If not, then all in favor here in the room?
Aye.
All right, and I know we have Madeline online. Are you an aye?
Yes, I'm an aye.
Thank you. Lisa?
Aye.
Thank you. Aaron?
Aye.
And I know I heard Mark, although I can't see him on our screen.
Aye.
Anyone else online? Wonderful. All right, we'll do the same with the minutes then. Hopefully you've had a chance to review. Anyone willing to offer a motion to approve?
So
Thank you. We have a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Madeline, for that second. Again, any further discussion? And if not, here in the room, all in favor?
Aye.
And Lisa, you're at the top of the screen, so we'll start with you.
I have no voice.
An aye. Let the record show there was a barely audible aye. We hope you're feeling okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and a hand raised. Madeline,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
and Mark.
Aye.
All right. Well, my report is very brief, and that is just to say that I'm excited for the conversation we're about to have, and really, really thankful to all the members of the committee and of the teams at both FSSA and IDOE. I know there was a tremendous amount of work that went into getting to what looks like, just a handful of slides here today. Literally dozens of conversations have been had around this, and I'm just appreciative of the efforts everywhere. So with that, I will turn it over to Courtney Hott to start walking us through where we go from here.
Okay, this is going to be some exciting stuff here. I'm really looking forward to this. I really think that the Policy Equity Group did an amazing job working with all of our stakeholders and really takes everyone's perspectives into view and trying to help us figure out what Indiana needs out of a QRIS system. So just some quick background for those who need it. In 2022, Indiana as a state adopted some policy objectives. We wanted to ensure that Hoosier children, especially vulnerable children, have access to early learning opportunities and have the skills for kindergarten and beyond. And then we also want to ensure that Hoosier families have convenient access to reliable and effective early learning opportunities. So this is something that we've been thinking about for a long time. We have these big overarching policy goals. In order to achieve this first objective, early learning programs have to build on foundational health and safety standards. That is just our automatic baseline, right? And so we are going to, if we have that baseline figured out, then we can continue to strengthen with quality to get to that goal of kindergarten readiness. And then the second objective can be achieved by expanding access while also in doing quality services, right? So it's not just about expanding access. It's about while we expand, we want to make sure that we are giving Hoosiers access to high quality care too. So by implementing a QRIS system that truly measures what's important and measures what matters, we can do that. So this also aligns with our roadmap here at Elac. We stated that we wanted to update the paths to quality and incorporate objective measures with the new birth to 5 assessment system, which we're so excited about, and understanding of quality practices and truly evidence and research-based practices that are out there. Following that, our intent was to require paths to quality participation for all providers to ensure that we are all thinking about what a high quality program looks like, as well as looking at how the state is investing its funds and ensuring return on investment in that the positions and the spots that we are purchasing on behalf of low income families, they are getting a quality experience and their children are ready for kindergarten. So just a couple of things. Quality improvement rating systems are just a leveler that states have to encourage independent childcare programs to support families in need and the state's policy aims. They also are required for states receiving funding from the federal child care and CCDF grant blocks. The quality rating improvement system creates a framework to assess the quality of care and then also to support improvement and to inform families. So part of this is also a consumer education piece. So while the state wants to be able to look at the type of quality these programs are providing, we also want to be able to share it with our families so that they know what they're getting into when they choose to send their children to a provider. Lastly, paths to quality is our QRIS system. So it is a trademarked name. It launched statewide in 2008 and it is currently a voluntary system. It actually hasn't been fully updated since its launch. So this is going to be a really exciting time in Indiana to see an update because as we all know, things have significantly changed since 2008, even just in the last 3 years with all that everybody's been through, especially in the childcare world. So this is going to be pretty fun. Some reasons why we want to modernize paths to quality. We want to create a less cumbersome program that focuses on what matters most to child outcomes. We want to measure what matters. We want it to not be a cumbersome process. We want it to be beneficial for programs to participate. We want it to be helpful for them to figure out where they need to grow. We want to provide more transparent data within indicators. So right now we only see what level they're at, but with this proposed new system, we will see what level they're at, but also where they're ranking within the levels inside of that. As some programs may excel at certain things and others may excel in different areas. We want to acknowledge that significant variation exists from classroom to classroom. Some of our larger organizations, what's happening in a 3's classroom might be very different from what's happening in an infant classroom. And so that's an important thing to recognize within our new measurement system. Lastly, we want to ensure a balance of supports and incentives to promote and reward quality improvement and sustainment. So that is why we are heading towards this. So this is just a quick look at what our current paths to quality requirements are for child care centers. As you can see, this is a lot of information. So on here, you can see there's additional specific indicators related to things like napping schedules, how the classroom is arranged, developmentally appropriate interest centers. Each center must contain at least 3 different items. While all of those things are really important, this is really a lot of compliance-based information, right? This doesn't tell us really what's happening in the classroom. It just tells us what we can see in the classroom. So with that, how the classroom is arranged and what eye level things are at, while we want our children to be able to see their artwork, that is really important. Is that truly a great measure of quality? Is that really telling us about child outcomes? Probably not. And so how can we adjust that with the new research that we have to show that we can actually measure child outcomes? This has been a great system for us to use over the last years, but it's just time for us to have an update. So here is more of those requirements. Your standards. So the strategic plan includes an annual evaluation, goal setting, and long range planning, which is something that we actually do really want to focus on, is we want to talk about how our programs are continuously improving throughout the year and not just one snapshot in time. So. Oh. Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna keep going. I don't want to hold us up on here. Okay, so you guys get the point. Lots and lots of stuff. And we can talk about it in more detail, but we are excited to move forward. So with that, so we had all of these policy visions, and then last year the General Assembly charged us with creating recommendations. So they asked us to, no later than December 31st of this year, develop recommendations for implementing a revised Paths to Quality program that maintains health and safety standards, integrates objective measures of kindergarten readiness, contemplates accredited kindergarten through 12 schools as on-site providers, and then lastly, incentivizes childcare providers to increase wages for childcare workers who complete education and training that result in a post-secondary degree or industry recognized credential. So this was the charge from the legislature. So we are going to start discussing these proposed recommendations for our quality rating and improvement system. A little bit of background on how we got to this point. We interviewed over 40 stakeholders with the Policy Equity Group, talking about the current QRIS system, what the vision would be for a future QRIS system. Many stakeholders within our industry of early childhood, outside of the industry, within K-12 schools. We had even the raters who complete the rating visits talk with us about how they view the program and how it can be better. We really left no stone unturned when it came to making sure we got stakeholder feedback. Providers from all different auspices were able to participate, even parents. So this is, like I said, very comprehensive, and I think we have some really good ideas here. So I'm going to pass it over to Jeff Capizano, who is the president of the Policy Equity Group and who did all of this research for us. And he is going to get into detail about our new priorities for this QRIS system and what our recommendations are going to look like.
Great. Thanks, Courtney. Good morning, everyone. Just want to start by saying I really enjoyed working on this project. I think, one of my favorite things to do is to, work with stakeholders like the providers and the parents and some of the state level administrators to come up with sort of ideas related to, how to make early childhood systems better. And so this was, a perfect example of that. When thinking about some of the priorities that we came up with for the new quality rating and improvement system, I think one of the things we focused on was what is this supposed to accomplish within the early childhood system? And so when you think about the role of a QRIS, it's really supposed to, define and measure quality. It's supposed to have a role in quality improvement of early childhood providers, and it's supposed to help parents make good decisions about childcare. And so when we're thinking about how to organize the recommendations, we kind of organize them according to the roles. And so, the first set of recommendations are really about quality measurement. And if you, listen to what Courtney was talking about related to the current system, I think, the recommendation is really around really focusing on measuring what matters most to positive child outcomes and to really measure those indicators really well. And so that's the focus of that area of recommendations. And then around quality improvement, I think you're not doing these ratings just for the sake of doing ratings. The goal is to learn something about the program that you ultimately use in a continuous quality improvement process. And so, another recommendation area is really around how you connect the ratings to a well-developed system of training and technical assistance and coaching to help sort of move providers forward. And then, this is all about sort of, supporting families and how to figure out how families can navigate sort of the early childhood system to find the type of care that works best for them, both in terms of quality and sort of, other preferences that they might have. And I think one of the things that was really interesting about talking with families was, they have they have a range of preferences for care. Some are really focused on I want my child to be collaborative. I want my child to be curious. Others are it's really important that my, child is getting ready to read. And so, really thinking about how to communicate those characteristics of providers that help parents make choices that best meet their needs and preferences. And so that was another set of recommendations. And then we have recommendations related to how you might incentivize providers to be a part of the system, and then how you might roll this out, because this is a pretty significant change to the current system. And we want to make sure that we're very intentional about how we sort of transition from this current system and to the new path to quality. All right, next slide. If you remember, I think in the last meeting, we talked a little bit about the literature and sort of, in doing the literature review, there are really these two big pillars of quality. The first is, adult-child interaction. So when you think about sort of what Courtney presented around materials and sort of even credentials, those are sort of things that might facilitate more engaging adult-child interactions. But the point of impact for what makes a difference in child development is the interaction. And so that's what we really want to measure. And so when you think about like what that means, it's like how sensitive is the caregiver to the child, and how they develop a relationship with a child, like what, how are they trying to convey sort of instruction to them, like serve and return and things like that. How are they organizing, the classroom in order to make sure that, you're getting these rich interactions. And so, that's sort of one big piece. And I think what the literature is talking about with relation to the shortcomings of just measuring interactions is that, you can measure the interactions, but you're not measuring the content that is conveyed through the interaction. Like what exactly are you conveying to the child through the interaction? And so the other piece of this is around curriculum. And so you need really strong, adult-child interactions, but you also need sort of a developmentally appropriate research-based curriculum that incorporates sort of the latest research, whether it be the science of reading, and that is aligned to the early learning standards. And so it's really those two pieces that really, when you measure those two things together, you're going to be seeing sort of better outcomes if the provider is doing well on those two things. And then the third piece is around, and this is part of the charge, is sort of good developmentally appropriate practice within the classroom is that you're trying to tailor instruction to where the child is developmentally. And so incorporating a child assessment that you learn sort of where the child is developmentally across all these different domains, and then you are, figuring out what is the best path forward for that child in terms of tailoring the curriculum. And then also you have, great data sort of on how the kids are doing at the classroom level. You can aggregate that to the program level, and then you have more information about how you would sort of plan to do quality improvement based on sort of what you're seeing with regard to the gains that children are making across which domains and things like that. So when we think about how we want to restructure Path to Quality, we're thinking about these three specific indicators that we want to be a part of the new system. So next slide. So getting to the indicators is kind of one piece, right? And then the second piece is how do you take the measurement of those indicators and then ultimately establish a rating system based on those indicators? And so this is what we came up with for that. And so, as Courtney mentioned, like health and safety standards remain the foundation of the system, right? And so that's why we put that on the bottom as sort of level one. And then when you think about kind of adult-child interactions, there's a couple of different measures out there. And I think, part of what the state will need to do is figure out, do a procurement to figure out which interaction sort of measure you might use, but you'll work with the publisher to determine sort of, what are the thresholds for interaction scores that might indicate sort of lower level interactions where there's a lot of room for growth, or sort of moderate interactions where they're doing pretty well but can still see improvement, or whether or not the provider is like really has high interaction scores. And so for sort of adult-child interactions, you would establish these threshold scores with whatever tool you ultimately decide on to figure out, is the provider at a level 2, level 3, or level 4 for that specific indicator. And then around sort of curriculum implementation, I think, we want to make sure that, to the extent that we can, we offer a lot of autonomy to providers and sort of the curriculum choices that they have. And I think that's a really important sort of part of this. And so just at a level 2, we're thinking, is the provider using sort of any sort of curriculum? And so there's a, specific set of indicators that, where that you can use to just to determine whether or not, there's sort of intentionality to the instruction that's happening during the day. And then at a level 3, you would, the state would sort of work with providers to determine sort of a list of research-based curriculum. And there's also, there's outside sort of entities that have lists of research-based curriculum that you can use to establish a level 3. And I think, one of the things that we heard a lot about with the current Path to Quality is that, you can have these materials in the classroom and you can check the box to say that those materials are there, but are they being used sort of to the benefit of the kids? And so the same can be said of curriculum. And so for level 4, it's not just about using the research-based curriculum, but is the provider using that research-based curriculum with fidelity? And, most publishers have a fidelity implementation tool that the state could use to ensure that not only is the provider using a research-based curriculum, but also that there's fidelity to the curriculum. And then with regard to the kindergarten readiness assessment, we would want the provider to use the state kindergarten readiness assessment just at level 2. And then at level 3, back to that point about like really good instruction within the classroom, assesses children where they are developmentally, and then links that assessment score to activities that the child might do to move them forward. So in level 3, we would have, the provider demonstrating how kindergarten readiness scores are used to set learning goals and to help instruction for children. And then at level 4 is where the provider might take all of that information on children and aggregate it and really develop a plan for quality improvement. And so that's how we see, and I know that's a lot, but that's how we see sort of the indicators being translated into levels. And then in order to achieve any of the levels, and I think Courtney will talk about this in a bit, the provider has to be doing each thing in the level in order to achieve that level. And so that's kind of how we recommend doing the ratings. You can go to the next slide.
And Jeff, I might just stop you there for just a second, because such a rich slide and lots of detail here. And I just want to make sure if folks have questions that we just offer them right here related to these levels in particular.
I don't necessarily have a question, just a comment. I appreciate the focus on the use of data for not only individual growth, but also to do that for program growth as well. I think it's important to have those data conversations early on in the child's development as we prepare them for kindergarten. So I was glad to see that as part of the recommendation.
Yeah, wonderful.
Just following that and related to that comment, I also want to say that it is important to echo every opportunity we can get, and I appreciate Jeff doing that, that is not only research-based, but that evidence is there to show. Because I think in the current system, we do have and continue to echo developmentally appropriateness, and then we check off on that as opposed to, really having an evidence that they're actually practicing what they preach, so to speak. So I really appreciate that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I have a question about the curriculum.
Sure.
I know this may not be fleshed out completely yet, but move up from the level 3 to level 4, when it mentions the fidelity score from a publisher. So along with this, will there be some sort of approved list of curriculum from which to choose?
I think ultimately that's the goal, right? To have I think ultimately I would say yes, that's the goal, to have a list of for folks to choose from that we have identified, or a group of folks have identified as research data-driven viable curriculum to be leveraged.
Okay.
And Kim, the DOE has been going through an extensive review process of curriculum, and we will be posting an advisory list, hopefully in March. But that could probably be a piece of the discussion that we have as we look to implement this.
Okay. Thank you.
So with the curriculum, we're just looking for a boxed curriculum, some sort of package deal. Is that what we're after? Because I'm just wondering, there are a lot of programs that use like emergent curriculum, and it's still very research based, but it doesn't come from a publisher necessarily. So I just want to make sure that we're leaving that open for those programs to still be able to use that.
I think the full, and Jeff, I welcome your comments. I think the full report gives a little additional explanation here, but your point is a really good one, Aaron, in that as I've heard state leaders talk about this, they don't want to curb the innovation that might be out there, and certainly to leave open the possibility for providers to try new things while always making sure that they are in fact research-backed strategies. So Jeff, I don't know what you would add. I think there are details to be worked out there.
Yep, I think that's right. And I think, in the report, we do talk a little, talk about the fact that you have to be very careful about sort of defining these lists, right? Because you don't want to necessarily impede on the autonomy of providers and using the curriculum that they think is best. And so one of the things that other states have done is that they have the list, but the list is constantly getting updated, and providers can submit their curriculum to the state to get on the list. And so then there's a conversation about the research base of the curriculum, how they're doing it. A lot of nature-based curriculums in Michigan are doing that to get on the list. And so we don't see this as here's the list, you got to use it. It's more of a dynamic process where you have the list, and then you're having conversations with providers about other curricula that might be able to be included, given a certain set of criteria related to the research base.
Yeah, I have a question. How does this translate to a site that is just an infant toddler site or a 0 to 3 site, since they wouldn't have that kindergarten readiness?
My understanding is the assessment is of the birth to 5 system. Is that accurate, Kelly?
We are still in the procurement process for the assessment. We are looking to have something that does measure birth all the way through kindergarten.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. Carry on.
Absolutely. And then just as the recommendations related to sort of connecting the scores to a quality improvement process. I think, the goal here is, to the point about the data, is that you're using this data in the aggregate to work with, the state in developing a quality improvement plan and connecting sort of, to the training and technical assistance network that the state has. And so that's one big piece of it. And I think the other big piece is, one of the things that we do see in other states is that a lot of the times the quality rating isn't necessarily about the provider's desire to improve quality, but it's about the lack of resources to actually do it. Right. And so this is most notable in those states that have like a BA requirement as the highest tier. And so, they're just programs in lower income communities that can't access teachers that have a BA or can't pay them because they can't charge parents that much. And so one of the things that we want to make sure of, with this is that, the quality rating is not affected by limited resources and the lack of access to training and technical assistance. And so we're recommending sort of the use of quality enhancement grants and then access to training and technical assistance, prior to the administering the initial rating for this. And I think, when Courtney goes through kind of the way that this will roll out, there will be a practice year. And so we want to make sure that, we're making sure that we're getting resources to providers in order for them to sort of do the best that they could possibly do sort of on this system. And I think the other thing we're learning sort of from other states is that it's really important to have sort of a state TA system that really tackles kind of all of the universal trainings. Like every provider is going to need training on whatever interaction tool that you use. Every provider is going to need sort of training on the kindergarten readiness assessment. But also you want to be thinking about getting some support directly to providers to give them some autonomy in sort of what they want to spend their professional development money on, and have it be provider driven, particularly around, the curriculum pieces of this. Do they need training from the publisher? Do they need sort of, other things, related to sort of quality improvement that might not be offered at the state level? And so you want to be thinking about really fortifying the state system of training and technical assistance, but also providing funds to providers to be able to sort of have some discretion about the professional development they get to support them in moving up the quality ratings. And obviously, you want to be creating effective communication strategies so that everybody clearly understands this. And I think, when we talk about the rollout, that first year of the transition is all about communicating how this is going to work in the subsequent years. So you go to the next slide.
Hey, Jeff, can I jump in real quick there?
Sure.
I just want to kind of tee up or share an idea or thought that I just want us to be cognizant of as we think about what you were just stating around funding, the direct funding for providers to help them utilize the tools, get the trainings, et cetera. So I think we'll just have to think through, and this is not saying that it's wrong, I'm just saying this is something we need to be thoughtful of from a funding standpoint, is that we have a few things going, right? So we already have a pretty decent amount of funding going into a contract with a vendor that provides training and technical assistance in our state. And the goal of our cost of care reimbursement rates is to get those rates to the point where it encompasses the whole totality of your program, which includes professional development, paying your staff, like all those nuances that go into operating a system every day, a program every day. And so that's really it's not a question or even a comment. It's more of a consideration as we continue to think about what that looks like in real life from a holistic state perspective.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Courtney. Thank you.
I have a question too.
Sure.
So if we're just talking training and professional development, where does national credentials and higher education fit into that? Because are we taking that out of what was already within Paths to Quality, or how are we strengthening that? Because we know that the research tells us that, the higher the level of the education that the educator has, the higher the interactions and the higher the quality.
Exactly. I mean, I do think so. Sort of accreditation and teacher credentials, those are like what the field considers kind of proxy measures of quality. And I think you're right. I think what all of those things are necessary to improve those interactions, but the measurement is about the interaction itself. And I think, some of the things from the National Academy is like, it's unclear whether or not sort of the BA is sort of perfectly linked to child outcomes. And so what you need is kind of to measure the thing that is kind of more directly associated with that, which is the outcomes. And so it's not to say that credentials aren't important, that accreditations aren't important. Those are very important. But in terms of a measurement, those are more like recognitions. What we're trying to do here is focus on sort of what is being measured.
I just want to make sure that as a state, we're not moving backwards, and, we're struggling to get teachers into the classroom, and I don't want to move backwards, and rather than them having a national credential or something, kind of say, well, as long as you can meet this and you have some sort of training, then you can be at the highest level, because then there's not a lot of incentive to kind of go higher with that, I guess.
Yeah, and I will just say, to your point, I don't think that's the direction. I guess when I was speaking to training and technical assistance, coaching support, that was on top of what you already bring to the table with your credentialing, your education, et cetera. I was just kind of teeing up the fact that those additional supports, because as you know, if you get a curriculum, you're going to still need some support on how to leverage it and make sure that it's actively and effectively being used. And so I guess that was the lane that I was kind of going down, of not necessarily taking those pieces away, what you're referring to away, but what are the additional day-to-day operational enhancements? Even as I put my teacher hat on, I walked in the pre-K classroom with a master's degree in human development and still had to struggle through leveraging teaching strategies goal. And so I think I'm tracking with you, and I just want to reassure you that that's not off the table.
Okay, sounds good.
I think it's important that we don't have credentialing and the quality of teachers and their commitment in a two separate boxes, if you will. I think they need to come together, and the more we help support the connectivity between those two, and there's a commitment on the teachers and providers, I think the credentialing would make more sense, and eventually it would be a second nature, I think, to do so, because I have always been of the opinion that just having or mandating or highly suggesting credentialing in and of itself does not make a quality provider or quality program for that matter. I think there needs to be that connectivity, and there needs to be that eventually, my hope is that those who are going into early education become committed to the extent that these all make sense. And this is why I'm going for training in higher education and credentialing.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Madeline. And as I think about Jeff's comments and the focus on the measurement itself, I think it will help us really strengthen our understanding and our ability to discern sort of where are the factors long-term that, are the most beneficial investments. And so I think this focus on the measurement of what matters while understanding that we expect there to be strong alignment between some of these things and those recognitions, as Jeff talked about earlier, is a useful way forward.
Mm-hmm.
I guess adding to Madeline's point, I think the ability to stack credentials on once you are in the workforce and hired into a program, even if you come in with minimal credentials at the time, you meet the base level, but how are we incentivizing and building the program where people can increase their credentials and stack onto that over time while they're in the profession?
This is a preview of a later agenda item, but we'll take it now, which is, I think this conversation is incredibly important, and especially given where we are from an access standpoint as it relates to workforce. We still have 15% of our 100 classrooms across our network closed for lack of staff. So we are going to hopefully vote here shortly around the formation of a task force to focus on the issues around workforce and come back, I believe, in the early part of the spring with some more particular recommendations for this group around that. Thanks for the tee up.
So will there be opportunities for, just as we're mentioning about this, will there be opportunities later on to review or see a draft of what is all included? Because I do feel the program itself, the credentials for that, the national accreditation, I still feel that is important for high quality programs, because Courtney may remember that was my very first question back to her after I reviewed the material. So where does that fall? Mm-hmm. So, we will be able to see that is somehow included before.
So I think there are a lot of details to be worked out, but part of what we are trying to do and what we engaged Policy Equity Group to do was to bring to us the research about sort of what are the factors that matter most, and to focus there as much as possible, which is not to say that other things don't matter, right? I mean, they absolutely do, and so what we expect, and you'll see here, I think in just a couple of slides, is a real planning year over next year. If we can agree sort of at a high level to these principles of the things that matter, that there will then have to be lots of discussion led by the state agencies around sort of how do we implement that.
Okay.
Thank
you.
I suspect they'll give this group opportunities to speak into that. I won't speak for Courtney and Kelly, but I bet they will. They usually do. Jeff.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Tell us about families.
Yeah, so I think the final sort of role of the system is really to help families make informed choices about care. And so some of the things that we're thinking about around these recommendations is that I think you can really improve the technology and communication that you currently have to sort of better support families in their choices. I think, and just kind of looking at the current system, it really focuses on the basic things that matter. It's like, what time do you need care? What is the age of your child? What quality level are you looking for? But there are opportunities to sort of ask other questions of families. It's like, tell me about your child. Does your child have special needs? Like, is your child a multi-language learner? And being able to sort of take some of that information and then pair it to characteristics of providers in order to support to support the choices, because I think we did hear a lot from the parents about their difficulty finding specific types of care. And so it would help to sort of build out the communication system a little bit. And I think, the other thing that, that other QRIS systems have found is the average rating that a provider will receive masks a pretty significant amount of variation from classroom to classroom within the setting. And so, one of the things, if you have a 1 to 10 scale and the average is 5, every classroom could be a 5, or half the classrooms could be a 1 and half the classrooms could be a 9, right? And so what we're trying to do is really give the parents a good indication of the experience that they will have when they put their child in that setting. And so what we're recommending is not only to sort of have sort of the overall rating, but also some indication of the variation that was found within the classrooms. You don't have to sort of call out every classroom in the rating, but to say, this was a 3-star, but we had, programs that ranged, or that classrooms that ranged from 2.5 to 3.5 or something like that, that just gives the parent an indication of sort of the variation that exists within. And I think the other reason, and the more important reason to sort of call that out, is because that helps the provider think about how they need to maintain quality across all of the classrooms within their program. And so that's one of the recommendations that we have. And then the final one is around, you have these core indicators of quality that are driving outcomes, but there are other things that parents want to know. And so thinking about establishing sort of micro credentials that might be stackable, I heard that mentioned, or information related to sort of the provider that helps to promote family choice. If you look at other states like Maryland, they have a bunch of micro credentials related to, does this teacher have special training in working with children with disabilities? Is this a teacher that really specializes in the creative arts? Is this a teacher that, has sort of additional STEM training? And so there's lots of opportunities through a micro-credentialing sort of approach where you can give parents more information about how providers are doing, but also, incentivize teachers to get special training. And we could talk about how we might link that to sort of, compensation or different monetary incentives to get those credentials. And so, in thinking about sort of, we want to sort of update the way that these ratings are communicated, provide some indication of the variation that might exist within a site, and then also think about additional information through micro credentials. So those are the 3 sort of recommendations related to parent choice. So then I think I'm going to hand it over to Courtney to talk a little bit about the rollout, if there are no questions on that.
That's really helpful, Jeff. And I guess I would just encourage the state team, as you're thinking about that initial planning next year, to think about how do we leverage that last bullet to speak to some of the concerns that have been raised here, and how do we incorporate some of those factors into whatever that distinction, series might become.
Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about incentives, and then I'll head on to the timeline?
Yeah. And so just in terms of the way we're thinking about this, we want to make participation in PASA quality a requirement if you're receiving a child care subsidy. And that we need to be thinking sort of more in that planning year about what that might mean for sort of the unlicensed ministries and how they're serving CDF families. We don't want to make a requirement actually limit the access of families to providers. And so, we want to be thinking about that, but the goal is mandatory participation. We also want to be thinking again about upfront quality funding to assist providers in achieving higher ratings, and how you might have additional funding to sustain the ratings. And I know that, currently there are additional bonuses, for achieving a level 4, and just wondering sort of, thinking about, doing a cost to quality study to better understand how much does it cost for providers to obtain and sustain these different levels, and then thinking about those costs, as Courtney said, in the subsidy system, and how you reimburse providers and how you provide sort of other quality funding to help them. And so this can't just be a measurement system. It has to be connected to the other pieces of the system, particularly around subsidy, around the training and TA system, and around sort of other vehicles of financing to help promote quality. Rating a provider on its own will not improve its quality. So it's important to do these other things as well.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Talk to us about timelines.
Yes, so our recommended timeline for this would be a 3-year implementation Year one, we want to look at socializing, planning, and communication. So we would want to look at a detailed implementation approach, which means looking at standards. What does each level look like built out? And then how do we want to measure those? Then once we decide that, engaging in the procurement process for tools so that we can measure these items. So an adult child interaction tool, the kindergarten readiness assessment is already in process, and then other related supports that we may need for programs. And then based on financial and operational feasibility, establish like a frequency of what those ratings are going to look like, how often it's going to happen, the scope of it, and all of that, because that is a factor that we need to consider. And then lastly, create and execute a robust communications plan so that we can, let everyone know that this is coming and this is exciting, and really hype it up, because this is going to be a big change and it's going to be a really exciting thing, but it's also going to be a lot of work. And so we want to make sure that we're there to support and also cheer along our programs. Year two would be the practice year. We would like to suspend all new past equality rating visits, rate new sites on the new system for practice purposes only, and then calibrate a score to kind of establish those final rating cut scores. And then resolve any issues that we come across. And then this would be a perfect time to conduct that validation study by piloting with specific programs and see what it looks like. And then lastly, we would love to see all of the sites rated under the new system in 2026 and officially sunset the past equality program. So that's where we're looking at for timeline. Does anybody have any questions on that before we talk about some additional considerations?
I do one somewhat related, if you can hear me.
We can hear you, Mark.
Okay, I just keep coming back. I see, rating system. I appreciate the consistency that this is appears to be able to provide. But are we confident in the consistency of the raters themselves? I mean, it's a group of systems and people, but are the people? Are we spending enough time knowing that part of the implementation is going to be consistent?
That's a really great point. And okay. If you look deeper into the report, I can give you a page number. It talks about the fidelity of the raters and how we train based on ensuring that there's consistency across all platforms. And then that also includes training providers on how to evaluate their programs to ensure effectiveness. So there is actually a big piece of that within the full report. Jeff, do you want to speak any more detail on that or ways that we can do that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a great point. I think, the tool itself is not reliable and valid. It's how it gets implemented by the raters. And I think, we do talk in the report about the training that's going to be necessary to ensure fidelity. And I think when you look at, at least with both of the major sort of measures of interaction, you get certified to be a rater. And in order to get certified, you have to have strong inter-rater reliability scores. And I think, once the system is in place, there are protocols and opportunities to ensure that you have strong inter-rater reliability and validity to the tool. And so that is definitely something that's a recommendation and something the state needs to be thinking about. And it's a really good point.
Mark, I also just really appreciated the fact that the state incorporated a practice year, which I think, will be helpful in ferreting out any challenges in the rating itself. And, if that process needs to be refined, it gives them time to do so.
On that rater
Perfect.
point, there's currently 8. Is that right? That just seems like a amazingly small number of people that come.
Yeah.
That's accurate.
It's accurate.
It's accurate.
Is that going to be enough people trained to do this on a new system? Or will we need additional workforce in that area as well? Just a thought.
You want the Director of the Office of Early Childhood answer? You want me to go out there? and respond? No, all jokes aside, I had the same thought, and I was actually kind of tracking in my mind. I know we just started a brand new contract for that work, not saying that it couldn't be amended as needed, but I had that additional thought again in the back of my mind around for capacity as far as coaching and the raters for this work. If only we had.
And I think that's a great point. If only we knew, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of math to be done within all of this, and that's where we really need to rely on OECASL and DOE to try to help us build this out into those standards and what it's actually going to look like, what it's actually going to cost, and then how we can leverage what we have, and then possibly be able to go back to the General Assembly even next year and say, hey, we created this based on your request, and now we're going to need more funding potentially to execute it. So that's always something to think about too.
I'm right to think, though, that we've identified existing funding streams
Yeah.
that could be repurposed in some ways to address the needs here. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're currently spending, if only 8, but we're spending on the passive quality system in a variety of ways. And so we're not starting from.
Not starting from zero. Yeah. So we currently spend in the current past quality system. So there is funding there. It'll just be kind of playing with those numbers to see what this new one's going to look like. Just a couple of other considerations before we have our final discussion and vote. As Jeff talked about earlier, the system will remain a block system. So you have to achieve all criteria within each. This is the recommendation that you would have to achieve all criteria within each block. However, there will be transparency on where programs rank throughout. So if they rank higher in a certain area, but are still not there with the other items, there's still going to be, you're still going to be able to see that so that we can ensure that transparency for parents to see and that they're building and trying to gain a higher quality rating. So it brings me to so they will have that in between aspect. Additional distinctions like the micro-credentials won't be tied to particular levels, but they could be available for programs excelling in particular areas, like STEM, or one of my favorite examples is that we visited sites that have outdoor classroom experiences, which is a really unique item that some families really may be looking for. And so figuring out a way to highlight those programs is important. And then lastly, we really want to see out of school time locations be incorporated in this and use a different indicator for that kindergarten readiness rather than the kindergarten readiness assessment. Indiana is prided on its relationship with our out of school time programs. Not a lot of states have the relationship with their out of school time programs that we do. And so we want to continue to build on that.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. Other questions? We've had great discussion throughout the conversation, so I really appreciate all of your participation and helping us think through these details. Questions for Jeff or any of the Courtneys or Kelly?
Maureen, I just wanted to kind of, if we could just be cognizant of a couple of things.
Sure.
First of all, I want to preface it with the fact that I love the fact that we're increasing quality and we're being more consistent about that quality. But I think we need to also keep in mind who we're serving as we switch over and we move forward. I think we do need to make sure that we share enough with families so that they understand the process and that we don't push some of those families out based on the new criteria that we're establishing. And I know we're talking about a lot of provider supports here, but there also has to be so much communication to the families so that they understand what is happening and that they're not left out in the cold when it comes to where they need to go and what they need to do. And they need to understand that the whole concept is for them and their children to raise that quality. So I think it's going to, back to Courtney's thought before, it's going to take massive communication on our part.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. And luckily we have some of those folks around the table to do that. So we know that that will happen and will happen well. I do think that this system has the possibility of really putting parents in the driver's seat and giving them, much more clarity around sort of the choices that they're making. And then all the tools they need to be able to make with the choice that's right for their family.
I really like that comment that was just made, because it is very critical that we focus on the families and their understandings and their choices, because after all, parents are the consumers. So without parents, all this work that we're going in would be moot, right? Because without them, none of the programs will be able to exist. So I think it is very, very critical that, we as a state team or individually, or those state departments that are working with families, really put some strong emphasis on how to engage, how to inform, how to engage, and how to, communicate, and how to support the families as they're making their, choices, informed choices.
Great point. No, I want to just echo and support those two comments, both Madeline's and Tanya's. And I know that I probably drove Jeff crazy in the process, because I consistently said, I just want everybody to be cognizant of the fact that this QRIS, path to quality, whatever we're calling it, is the Office of Child Care intends this to be a consumer education tool to put the purchasing power in families, that when we give our stamp of approval, our quality seal, that we're telling families that this is a safe, high quality place for you to take your child. That is the ultimate bottom line of what this QRIS system is supposed to be, and all the nuances that go in and up between it. And so the good news is you have a person who's super passionate about family engagement, leading the charge, with the understanding that, all jokes aside, that this is truly what the Office of Child Care, our funder who's funding these opportunities, intends for this to really be. And so I would be remiss if I didn't call that in and just remind everybody of really the heart of what we're doing this work for. So thank you for calling that in.
Any other thoughts or feedback before we vote?
I guess I have a question. What exactly are we voting on? It feels like there's still so many unknowns in this process. We don't know how the curriculum is going to be, accessed, or who's going to, who's going to be looking for that. Is this group going to, have the ability to, have some sort of weigh in on, which one is actually selected, or, what makes it to the list? Like, who are those people? The same thing with the assessments. Like, I just feel like there's still a lot of unknowns. So like, can you kind of describe, I guess, exactly what we're voting on?
Yeah, Erin, that's a great question. And this comes down to kind of like a governance structure idea. So when you look at the Early Learning Advisory Committee, was created by the governor to provide recommendations to the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning and the Office of Kindergarten Readiness on how to push policy initiatives in the state of Indiana. So our recommendations, what we're doing is we're voting on these big picture ideas to then give to the governor's office and the Office of Early Childhood and Office of Kindergarten Readiness to then execute. So we are then trusting those offices to take these recommendations and keep them at top of mind while creating these new programs. So we will continue to be an advisory board throughout the process. So as they start to create these new standards and the assessment and the curriculum lists, they will continue to come to us for an advisory role. And so something that I've also been working on on the back end that you guys will see coming out this year is really creating more of a true structure behind this, and like a feedback loop, so that we have more discussions about actual topics that are coming forward rather than just kind of talking about what's happening already. And after we get through this, we'll talk a little bit about, we're going to start our first subcommittee. And we're going to talk about workforce in that subcommittee. And so this will be the new process of how recommendations are born. So we will have subcommittees with specific tasks that will go through and come up with recommendations that will then turn into our annual recommendation report. So this was kind of an ad hoc report just because of the legislature. And then we have the other one coming up in the spring, but I want it to become more of a standing governance structure so that we are really operating like a true advisory board and like a true state advisory council based on what our requirements are from Indiana legislation, but also through the federal level, because Indiana is required by the Office of Child Care to have a state advisory committee, and Elac serves as that. So not only do we have roles in Indiana statute, we also have roles from the federal requirement to get CCDF funding. So our board has a lot of responsibility, and I want to ensure that we are remaining consistent and transparent and operating in a way that is helpful to the offices, and can truly serve as an actual advisory. So our role is to, long story short, I kind of went off on a governance lecture there. Long story short, Courtney knows that this is my jam. So we are really trying to give big picture ideas and driving force behind it. And then we trust Kelly and Courtney's leadership within the agencies to execute on our behalf. Does that answer your question? And if anybody has any other things to add on to that, I would happily hear it. Courtney, Maureen, Kelly.
No, I think you answered it well. And we learned about governance. So it's learning.
If anybody wants to have coffee and talk about governments, text me.
All right. Any other questions, particularly while we have Jeff on the call? And again, Jeff, I just appreciate both the expertise that your team brought and the level of inclusiveness. I know you conducted a lot of interviews to get at the heart of these recommendations, as well as looking at an understanding of the literature, examining what other states are doing, which we didn't talk about much here today, but is reflected in the report as well. And so I think all of those things have been helpful in getting us to this point.
And the report will be posted after our vote today. So everybody can read it in more detail and see all of the really great background information that went into this.
So what we have is a condensed version then?
No, you have the full version.
That's the
Yeah,
one
I mean,
on
for the
paper.
public.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you have the full version.
Got you. Right.
So if we are through with discussion, is anyone willing to make a motion to support these recommendations, which I'll just remind everyone are due to the General Assembly on December 31st by the terms of our charge.
Maureen, I just noticed his hand is up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Is their hand up? Sorry, Lisa.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe she's just,
Jeff,
okay.
yeah, Jeff has a hand up on the screen.
Oh,
Oh, Jeff, did you have or is that the mouse?
Is it the mouse?
it might just be the mouse. Thank you, Kim. It's like she knows me well. Ever since I skipped going over the agenda one time, Kim's checked my math here appropriately. So, all right. I appreciate all the discussion and certainly this effort to, I think, both simplify the existing system and focus on the things that matter most for child outcomes. Is anyone prepared to make a motion to approve?
If we need amendments too, we can also make a motion for an amendment in. I should have said that earlier. If there's any concerning points that anybody has that want to amend it, we have the opportunity right now to propose amendments, vote on those, and then vote on the amended version. So however we need to do that to get it approved so that we can submit it to the General Assembly. Happy to work with you guys.
Let's see where we are overall. Anyone ready to make a motion?
I do.
Ready to make a motion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sherry. Madeline, we had a motion here in the room from Sherry. Do you want to turn your motion into a second?
I second it. Yes.
Great. Any further discussion?
So to be clear, are we voting on the long document or are we voting on those 3 areas that says the simplified quality rating and improvement system?
I think it's fair to say that we are voting on the long document as represented by the slides number 13 through 21. Recognizing, as I think the document itself does too, that there are lots of decisions that will have to be made along the way and continued discussion to be held. All right, with that, we have a first, we have a second, and let's put it to a vote. All in favor here in the room, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed in the room? All right, on screen then, Lisa, you're up first. All right, let the record show there was a thumbs up. Thank you. Really hope you're feeling better. Madeline.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
All right, wonderful. Thank you all. I know there was a tremendous amount of work that went into this, and I really, really appreciate it from all the committee members and team, as I said earlier. All right, next up goes to the heart of some of the conversation we were just having and the need to form a workforce subcommittee. And I think, Courtney, you're going to just share with us the background and what we have planned here.
Yeah, so workforce is a really complicated topic, especially in an area like childcare and early childhood education. We are very much in a workforce crisis right now, workforce shortage. As Maureen mentioned, in her centers alone, 15% of her classrooms are closed. And so that is something that we as a state need to be mindful of as we move forward, particularly in things like this quality rating system, as well as our regulatory review that's coming up in the spring. So with that, we will be creating our first subcommittee, also to kick off our new governance structure that will be coming through the pipes. So the charge for this subcommittee is going to be to propose a plan to accelerate pathways into and through early learning roles that offer low barriers to initial entry, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and then build on industry recognized credentials, maximizing portability and incentivize ongoing professional development. So we really want to bring people into the field and then develop them into these high quality teachers that want to stay in the field and continue to produce amazing outcomes for our children. Erin Donovan is going to chair this subcommittee as she is the member appointed by the governor to represent higher education and industry credentials for this board. So there is a specific appointment that has to happen in statute for somebody who's representing the higher education world, and that is Erin. So she is going to take that on. The board is going to include representatives from Head Start, Indiana AEYC, so Indian Association for the Education of Young Children, the Commission for Higher Education to ensure that our credentials are stackable and industry recognized, OECASL, Indiana Department of Education, Early Learning Indiana, and more. So the plan is for the group to bring a comprehensive plan back to the board for endorsement. We have not set an official date yet, as we want to kind of work with the committee and see what we think is possible, but I would really like to see something by our March meeting. So that is, because I mean, our next meeting's in January and like literally like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So, and it's the holidays. So our hope is that by March, we will have kind of an updated workforce, plan or just policy initiative alignment around what we want to see the state doing to help support our workforce in Indiana. So I would love to take a vote on that. And if everyone approves on the charge, chairing representatives, and happy to take any feedback as well on what this is going to look like, because this is your subcommittee.
I think it's a really important task and I like the charge and we'll look forward to the recommendations from the group, assuming we form the subcommittee here. Anyone willing to move that we do so?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Rob.
I
And is there a
second.
second? Thank you, Madeline. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion around that? If not, everyone here in the room, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. And let's run through the roll online. Lisa. Maybe we'll get 2 thumbs up. All right.
There we go.
Is that a thumbs up? That's an aye, Lisa? Yes. All right. Madeline,
Aye.
Mark,
Yeah, I
and Erin.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you for the time that you will invest in that, Erin. We know that it's an important conversation. All right. I think next we'll turn our attention to something that doesn't require a vote, but is also important and of interest to us all. Courtney, you're going to share an update on the federal relief funding.
Yes, good morning. Do we normally meet in the afternoon? I feel compelled to say good afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is awesome.
So good morning. Again, my name is Courtney Penn, the Director of the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning, a division of Family and Social Services Administration. Yes, I have to say that each time. No, nobody makes me. I just feel compelled to. So just wanted to share at a high level. So I know in our last meeting, we had some conversation around the fiscal spend down of our federal relief dollars specifically, as we look to see that in September 30th of 2024, which I feel will be here in 2 blinks. Those fundings, these last set of fundings will have to be out the door and spent. And so what myself and some super helpful thought partners have helped develop is what we are calling the Supporting Indiana's Early Care and Education System Federal Relief Report. And so we are finalizing some pieces now and going through some final reviews just to make sure that everything is in alignment with what we are sharing, what others the executive level at FSSA and the governor's office feel comfortable with us putting out there and sharing. And so as we are tightening up that report, and the goal is to have that out soon. And another fun fact about that is that where it will live is on a brand new webpage that the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning has developed, which encompasses all of our transitional priority areas, which includes a transitional page where this particular report will live once it's posted live. We also now have a page specifically for the preschool development grant that highlights the application that was submitted on behalf of the state of Indiana. If you recall, the $42 million that we were awarded for that application that FSSA wrote in collaboration with the Department of Education and some other strategic stakeholders, and we received that funding at the beginning of January of this year, which again feels like a blink ago. And so we have that page, and we also have a page dedicated to our regulatory reform work that is happening through FSSA as well. So super exciting times right now as we look to see where this work will continue to take us, and leveraging opportunities to be as transparent as possible with initiatives and priority areas that are coming directly out of the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning. So in this specific report, you will be able to see some of the things that I've highlighted before as it pertains to the stabilization grants, when we covered co-pays for families, when we were able to help with background checks and other onboarding costs for childcare providers during the pandemic, the 20% above market rate that we paid during the pandemic and continue to pay that as a baseline with these new cost of care rates, how much federal relief dollars are being set aside and leveraged currently to help support those new cost of care rates that we established earlier this year, this late summer, early fall of this year, different opportunities for the licensing work group that took place where we were able to leverage to be able to pay childcare providers as subject matter experts. Those came out of federal relief dollars too, to help drive the work of the regulatory space. The third party vendor and lawyer that we're leveraging to do that work and supporting that as well. And we've even set aside money to help support Elac's work and that regulatory reform work as well. And so you will see that more robust report with direct lines of the specific federal relief buckets that they come out of, what's ongoing, what's complete, and what's kind of forecasted, if you will, as far as spending out the rest of the remaining dollars, which they are all well accounted for. And so rest assured that I have no fears that those monies will be out of the door by September of 2024. So just want to tee up that opportunity and share that with you all, that we're about 90% ready to get it out the door. And so just want to make sure that when we share that final product, that it's something that's easily consumable and tracks on all cylinders. And so just wanted to share that, and again, share the information about our new websites as well on our FSSA webpage that will take you to this report, and already can take you into the preschool development grant application that we wrote for. And you can see the different strategies that have line items and funding streams connected to them as well.
I just really appreciate the transparency there. I know no one was expecting to get an extra $1.2 billion to spend. And so I appreciate the record keeping and look forward to reading the report in full.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Courtney? Sorry. Terrific. I think we are ready for public comment. We do have a number of folks in the room. I don't know if anyone wants to offer public testimony. Typically, we limit that to 2 minutes per person, but we welcome your comment at this time. All right. No one in the room is feeling chatty today. So we appreciate your attendance nonetheless. Thanks for being here. Seeing no public comment, and if there are no additional items from the committee, then I think we are ready to adjourn the Early Learning Advisory Committee let's go ahead and end it for the duration of 2023. So
Yes.
we will see you on January 9th from 1 to 3. And Courtney, we're back here in this room for that meeting.
Yeah, we are back here because legislative session starts that week, and we have been told early learning is going to be a top priority. So we want to make sure that we're available here to aid and give information to our legislators across the street. So yeah, we'll be here.
Terrific. Thank you all so much. I hope you have an enjoyable end to your year. And I said to someone yesterday, the exact right mix of hustle and bustle and rest, whatever is your jam, I hope you find